Hello guys, this is CodeNCode and this is ninth lecture of Spring Boot backend development course. In this course, we are building backend services for restaurant app, right? And in this lecture, what we are going to do, we are going to add cart APIs. Basically, user should be able to add certain items into its cart. Later, we'll add order APIs in which you can store the order details, order done by the users, right? So in this lecture, we'll be adding cart APIs, right? So let's get started. All right, so let's start by adding cart entity. So new Java class, let's call it cart, right? And annotate with entity, right? I'm going to name it. Uh, okay, my bad. I want to name it. Let me just change it to refactor rename cart item, right? And I'm going to name the table as cart, right? But I'm going to name this class cart item. I'll explain that in a moment why I chose this naming convention. So this is a cart item because this is going to be a single row inside the cart table, right? Which is cart item, right? That's why. So private long ID, we have an ID, right? And of course we'll have a quantity and we'll have price, right? Of each quantity. Yeah. And we'll have some more things like uh, private UUID, user ID clearly, which for which user this card item is, right? And we'll also have private UUID, um, uh, item ID, right? And this is basically the cart item, right? My bad. This is basically ID of the food item. Food item table is different, so it must have each food item have their own ID, right? This is that, right? So when we have a cart item row, we can take the ID, fetch the food item, and verify whether the price entered by uh, whether the price sent here to save in the cart is same as the price of the food item that you are trying to tell me to save, right? Now, I'm also going to say one more thing, private string item name. Yes, I want to save these details into the cart. So let's annotate it with ID and yeah, generated value identity should be unique. Okay, we have ID. The things, for example, item name must not be null, not blank, right? uh, Item name can not be empty, right? My bad, this is the message. All right, so item name cannot be empty. Quantity at the rate positive, right? Should be positive, right? uh Quantity should be positive, right? As simple as that. Again, I forgot to add, this is a message actually. And price, again, this also should be positive. Item, again, message, I'm okay. What was it? Price must be positive. All right. And then user ID and item ID will take care of these two. All right. So user ID, the ID of the user for which we are trying to add the cart item, and then item ID is the ID uh, of that of food item, right? Yes. All right. So yeah, this is our cart entity. Let me just alt enter, generate, alt insert, getters and setter. And one more thing about the getters and setters, if you don't want your class to be this bulky, right? What you can do, you can simply use Lombok dependency, and that will generate getters and setters without your class being this bulky, right? Just by the annotation, you don't have to write actually getters and setters, right? Maybe from the next lecture I'll start doing that. Just an idea for you, right? We are not going to set the ID, it is auto generated. All right, let's generate a constructor also. first of all empty constructor, and then one, yes, I'll need user ID, item ID, name, quantity, and price. All right, this dot user ID, item ID is item ID, right? Name, quantity, price, and yeah, price. All right, so we have constructor for that. All right, now that we have the cart item, let's define a repository. Java class interface, we'll call it cart repository, right? All right. This has to be a repository, and we must extend JPA repository. This is for cart, yeah, cart item, and ID is long. All right, we have this, and we must define a list of cart items, and we'll call it list is Java util, of course, find by user ID. All right, and we'll provide the user ID. Yeah, find by user ID, list of cart items. Yeah, my bad, user ID is actually UUID. Yeah, so in the repository we must have a method to find all of the cart item by a user ID. I'll provide you a user ID and you will give me all of the cart items of that particular user. That's why it is important to define it here, and we have done that, right? So now we have cart item, we have repository, and let's define a service, right? Let's call it cart service, annotated with that service. And now here we are going to use as a auto wire private cart repository. If you see, we have been getting this this what do you call it, warning. If you want to get rid of it, you can get rid of it by defining my bad, an constructor which takes input the cart repository. My bad, this is not cart repository, public cart service, and then cart repository, you can take it here. These are cart repository is equals to repository. Instead of auto wiring it, what you are doing it here, where's that cart repository? Oh, I want it private cart repository, and then here using the constructor, still maybe private final. Okay, and it's never used. Yeah, we are going to use it. Okay, so in the service we are going to provide one as of now, let's define one method, that is find by user ID, right? So from here we'll return a list of cart items, and we'll call it fetch user cart items, right? Not the user, we'll need UUID of user, and then from here we can return what was it, repository dot find by user ID, pass the user ID. See, you are not getting the warning anymore because we are using constructor injection. Earlier we were directly using field injection, for example, any other places, and that's why you will get a simple warning, right? As you can see here, field injection is not recommended. That's why you are getting a warning. I was just trying to show you a way where you won't get that warning. Basically, constructor injection is recommended, and that's exactly what we are doing here. We are injecting the field using the constructor, right? And that's why we are not getting the warning. Nevertheless, we have defined a method to fetch all of the cart item of a user, right? Yeah, we must define other fields also. Like, let me just remove this. We must define other fields also, other methods also. For example, add, very important one, to add a cart item for a user, right? And update it, delete it, things like that. So let's go ahead and define those also. All right, so let's try to add other functions. For example, public void add cart item. Yeah, we'll be provided a cart item. We are going to save it in the repository. Before that, we have to make some checks, right? For example, go back to the cart item. User will provide the user ID, a user ID for which user we are going to save the cart item, right? And then the item ID, what item we are going to add. They can also provide the quantity, right? User ID, item ID, and quantity. Name we can fetch from the item ID. We can directly fetch the item, and then we can save the name and also the price of that, right? So user must provide the user ID, item ID, and the quantity, right? So let's go back to the service. So these are the things we'll be receiving from the user or the client, right? We need to make sure that the user provided is actually the valid one, and the food item that they want to add us into the cart actually is the valid food item, right? So we'll need two things: food item repository and the user repository, to make sure the food item ID and the user ID pass are actually valid, right? So let's define the user ID, user repository, and the food item repository. Yeah, again, constructor injection. Yeah, these two things. Yeah, we have user repository, food item repository. Here where we are going to save it, we must make sure that the user provided is actually valid, right? So user, the one that we have added, user is equals to user repository dot find by ID, and in the cart item we have the user ID, right? So the find by ID will return the user if it is the valid ID. Otherwise, what we can do, we can throw an error directly, or else throw. Right? What you can do, you can throw an exception if the user is not found, right? So what you can do, you can define that you can provide the exception. I want to throw invalid ID exception, right? Exception. Okay, it expects, yeah, here throws invalid ID exception. So what I'm doing here, let me just do one thing. What I'm doing here is this: user not found with ID. Yeah, so what I'm doing here, I'm trying to fetch the user by the ID provided by the client, right, in the request. If we didn't find that ID in the database, in the user database, we are going to throw an exception, that is invalid ID exception, that the user ID that you have provided is invalid, right? Just to make sure that the user is valid, right? Then we need food item. Food item is equals to, again, from food item repository, we are trying to fetch the food item by the ID, right? Get item ID. If we didn't find that, again, invalid ID, so we can return the same invalid ID exception. Yeah, food item not found with ID, this one, as simple as that, right? If we have found it, what we are going to do, we are going to update the price of it. So cart item dot set name, right? Food item dot get name, and cart item dot set price, food item dot get price, right? And we are not setting the quantity because quantity is expected to be sent by the user, right? Here, one more thing. In the cart item, we are expecting that the item must not be blank, right? And yeah, if the user didn't provide the name, we are going to throw an exception. And I think we can leave it, because even if the user did not provide the item name, we already have it, right? All right, so not blank. If I remove it, user may not provide it. If the user is providing the item ID, it's fine, we can find the other things. Other not null. Okay, yeah, user is not expected to provide the name, right? We can already have it. We can already get it from the item ID, right? Similarly, the price, let's just remove this also. We are fetching the food item, and price we can fetch it from there, right? Yeah, looks good. All right, so the user is sending three things: item ID, user ID, and what was it? We need Item name they may not provide it, that's fine. Item ID, user ID, and the quantity, how many items they want to save in the cart of that item, right? How many item they want. So name and the price we are fetching from there, and then we are saving it, right? We don't need anything extra. Yeah, and then we are saving it. Once you save it in the database, you can return it, right? Instead of void, let's call it cart item, right? Once you save an item, saved copy will be returned to you, and that you can return. So it will have the price and all, everything will be there, right? So this is add cart item. Now let's define a controller for it. So cart controller, add the rest controller, and request mapping should be mapped to /cart, right? Let's define two endpoints. First to get all of the cart items of a user, then and one another to add a cart item into the database, right? So at the rate post mapping for adding. Post mapping, it should be /add, right? uh, as of now, public void add cart item, right? And we'll be getting a cart item from the request body, and we have to validate it at the rate valid. The thing is that inside the cart item, we have the user ID and we have the item ID, right? And these two must not be null. At the rate not blank message, user ID must not be empty, right? Similarly, item ID must not be empty. So another check for item ID. Item ID must not be empty. And then quantity, we are already checking that, right? So these checks will be performed because of this at the rate valid annotation, right? Once we have the cart item, what we can do, we can save it. So we can save it, cart item, let's call it saved item is equals to, we need the repository. Again, I'm going to auto wire it, basically field injection, at the rate auto wired private cart service, right? Again, we'll get that warning, but you can ignore that. I've already shown you how you can actually uh, ignore this, how you can basically get rid of this warning. Just use the constructor injection, right? So we have the cart service, my bad, cart service dot add to cart. I can pass the cart item. It throws an exception, so throws invalid ID exception, right? Now once we have the saved cart item, we can return response entity, right? Yeah, and then here, my bad, response entity of cart item. So what we are doing, returning, we are returning response entity of cart item, and we'll return back the item that was saved, right? So we are returning the saved item, and we are setting the status to created, which is 201, right? As simple as that. So this is to add a new cart item, and we have to define an endpoint to fetch all of the cart items. So at the rate get mapping, should be slash get slash id. This is the user id, right? Path variable, let's call it user id, right? User id is uuid, and this should be called user id. Now I'm defining the endpoint as /cart /get /user id. I'll pass the user id here. That will be mapped here as a path variable. Then I can return the response of list, not just cart item. It will be a list of cart items, right? So what I can do, return yeah, response entity dot status, okay, my bad. http status dot ok. Okay is to 200 dot body. In body I can return service. Which service is food item service dot get food item by id. I can provide the user id and I'll get food item. What's that? This food item service get food item by id. Food item service, have we not was get all food items, my bad. Get all food items. Yeah, I'm passing the user id and using that I'm getting. Okay. Get all food item, this is my service. Yeah, not all, maybe I was looking at something else. The function is fetch user item. Okay. I need cart item service, my bad. I'm fetching user and then have user id and then I can fetch. Okay, is not public. Go back here, define it public. All right, we shouldn't have any issues here. Fetch cart items. Now what? Make as a static. Cart service we have defined, yes, and then we have food item service. Cart service. All right, we have food item service. For some reason I imported that. All right, so we are getting all of the food items and then returning it. So we are adding a food item and then we are returning it, right? So let's go ahead and test it first. Let's see how many errors we get and how many errors we debug. All right, show me the console. All right, okay. Yeah, application is up and running. As you can see, we don't have cart table. Now we have cart table, right? And if I boom, we remove this one. All right, if I run it, this is role, this is cart. We have id, we have item id, item name, price, quantity, and xyz, whatever it is, right? So I've added some functions already. So I want to add a cart item. What things I need to provide? If you remember, to add a cart item, slash cart slash add, right? Slash cart slash add, and inside the body I have user id and item id. User id and the item id, these are the only things I'm providing. User id, item id, and I need to provide the quantity also. Yeah, quantity also. If I try to save it, let's see. Yeah, we are getting 401 because in the header I need to provide this. Maybe I've deleted all of the users. Yeah, that's what I do. Yeah, the user is not present there. Let's go ahead and add a user. Add user, here it is, right? With admin role. Just go ahead and save it. It is saved. Now go back here and this item id is saved. If we have a look at here, let me just, user id is saved. Whatever user I have added along the scripts, I am saving its user id. I've already taught you how you can save variables, right? So I have the user id, and just to make sure whether we have the food item also, we have food item. If I try to fetch this food item, if I try to fetch this, I already have a food item, burger. So we already have burger id also. We have food id and burger id, right? Now I can go ahead. I have the food item, I have the user user for which I want to add into the cart. As you can see earlier here, when we were fetching all of the items from the cart, it is empty, right? So I want to add food item into the cart. For this user, of which id I have already saved while I was adding a user, burger id is already saved. Now let's try this. 500 internal server error. Let's go back here. Okay, what is that? Unexpected. No validity could found for user id cannot be blank, right? User id is not blank. Item id is also not blank. Yeah, no validator could be found for constraint not blank. Validating type uuid. User id, let's go back here. User id cannot be empty. User id must not be empty, right? This no validator could be found for constant not blank. Okay, it's having hard time to check not blank for user ID. Should work. Earlier we had defined the user where we had UUID. Okay, we have not added not blank on UUID. Maybe we need to add some other validations. Not blank is not working for UUID. What it could be? Non blank, maybe not null. Let's try that. All right, let's try this first. Let's try that. All right, let's rerun this. Not blank is not able to check whether the UUID is empty or not. That's why we are getting that error. If I try to validate it using, yeah, it's created. Let's go back here. So the thing is, not blank cannot verify whether the UUID is valid or not, right? But non-null can, right? So we send the user ID, item ID, and the quantity, and we have got it, right? So the item ID we sent was for the burger that we are adding here. Add food item here, right? We are adding a burger, right? And its price is 69.99. So when we try to add a cart item, this is 69.99. We are fetching the price using the item ID, right? And the name also, right? So this is the cart item for user ID user, right? If you go back here and now if you fetch it, you have item ID, which is UUID. That's why it's messy. ID, item ID, name, price, quantity, and the user ID. For this user, we have added one cart item, right? All right, so let's try to fetch user cart items. Not found. Slash cart slash get slash user ID. This is the endpoint, and as you can see, we are able to fetch the cart items, right? I've added it for the burger. So in the controller, uh, add endpoint and the get endpoint are working fine, right? Now, all right, let's add other endpoints like update the cart item and update cart item, remove elements or delete cart item, right? Yeah, these two. Let's implement these two functions also. All right, let's add an endpoint to remove inside the service to remove uh, a cart item from the cart, right? So public void remove cart item, right? We are given a cart item. Will not need a cart item. Will only need long item cart item ID, right? Using this we can remove the cart item. So what we can do, uh, we need repository dot delete by ID, right? So we'll provide the cart item ID and using which we are going to delete it, right? So we have cart item. Let me just have a look at it. So we'll be providing the cart item ID and using which we can delete it, but we need to make sure that this ID is for this user, right? We need to make sure that the cart item we are deleting is for a particular user. We should not just pass a cart item and delete any item from anyone's cart. We should not be able to do that. We should get user ID and the user ID and the cart item ID both, right? So user ID, cart item ID. All right, these two things we need. Yes, let's go back and in here cart item service we need this and we need user ID also, right? So first of all, let's fetch a cart item, right? And we can throw new invalid ID exception. We can say invalid cart item ID. cart item ID, right? So I'm trying to fetch, yes, in here throws invalid ID exception. So I'm trying to fetch the cart item. If we did not find the cart item, we are going to throw an exception that the cart item ID is invalid and we didn't find any cart item using this ID. Once we have the cart item, we can actually check whether this is of this user or not. So when someone tries to delete a cart item from a user's cart, we must get user ID as well as the cart item ID so that we can make sure that the item that we are removing is from a particular user. It should not be just any random cart item. So if right, if the cart item inside the cart item we already have user ID, so we'll fetch that. If that user ID does not match the user ID that you have provided as a client, we are going to throw an exception, and it won't be invalid ID exception, invalid operation exception, right? And we are going to mention here invalid operation exception. Let me just close this. We will throw an invalid operation exception that the let me just change it. User doesn't have this item in their cart. All right, something like that. So this item is not part of this. It may be wrong. User doesn't have. This is correct. When we say this item, we mean the item with the cart ID, this one. All right, and this cart item is not in the user's cart. It is inside someone else's cart. So we can throw this exception. If that is not the case, we can remove it. Cart item dot my bad. Cart repository dot delete. Finally, right? So first of all, the ID must be valid. Second, it must be of the same user. If it must, you must provide a valid user ID also for which this cart item was added, right? If that is not the case, again throwing an exception. Finally, we will remove it, right? So we can go back to the controller and add the rate delete mapping slash remove slash user ID. I need two things from here: user ID slash cart item ID. All right, and then the item that was deleted. Okay, just go back here, cart item service. In here, when we are deleting, after deleting, we can return the cart item that we have fetched, right? So that this cart item I can return back as the response that hey, this cart item was removed, right? So controller, yeah, cart item service dot remove cart item. All right, I'll pass the cart item ID and the user ID. As simple as that. Cart item ID, is there an issue with this? This is not UUID, this is long. Cart item ID is long, and then we must throw invalid ID exception and invalid operation exception. These two exceptions we must throw. All right, return response entity dot status. Okay, Control Z, and dot body, side body, we are going to set this. Right, so what we are going to do, we are going to remove the cart item that would return us an actually cart item which was removed. I'm sending back that along with the status okay. If we didn't find the cart item, or it is not part of cart of any invalid user, sorry, of any user, or of the user ID basically passed, then we are going to throw an exception, right? As simple as that. All right, so we have added delete mapping also, right? Let's go ahead and test it. Delete mapping, we have the cart item, right? And the ID is 1. Let's go ahead and delete, duplicate, I'll call it 16, 16, 16, remove cart item, right? So slash cart slash remove, yeah, slash cart slash remove for user ID and then cart item ID. Then I need user ID slash cart item ID, which is 1, and it is going to be a delete mapping. Control S, yeah. If I send it now, yes, 200 okay, because the item was deleted, and this is the deleted item, right? If I go back, add cart item, if I try to add it again, I'm getting again cart item is added, but this time with ID 2. So if I'm going to remove it, I'm trying to tell that, hey, for this user ID, delete item 1. I should get an error that invalid cart item 1. Same way, if you change the user ID, which is this, right? If I pass the invalid user ID, right, instead of C, let's call it T. Try to delete that. 404 not found. My bad. Did I remove something else? Yeah. Slash remove slash. Yeah. Invalid cart item ID. Let's say cart item ID is valid, right? But the user ID is different. User doesn't have this item in their cart. As simple as that, right? So this user is user ID. So both of the errors are working fine. Remove this and pass the user ID. User underscore ID, right? If I try to delete this, it will be deleted, right? Yeah. So this endpoint is working fine. The remove endpoint is also working fine. All right. So let's define one more endpoint to update the cart item, right? And then, yeah, this would be completed. All right. So let's go ahead and add an endpoint for, updating the cart items. All right. So let's go ahead and add an endpoint to update, right? At the post mapping slash update, and again while updating, yeah, slash update, we'll need the whole cart item. All right, so what things do we need? First of all, you'll need the ID without a doubt, right? You'll need the user ID, you'll need the item ID, and of course quantity, price, everything you need except the name will be the same. You would want to change the quantity only, nothing else you can change, right? But the other things are required. So I'll need that and I'll update it, right? So go back to cart service and public void, public, not void, but cart item, update cart item, right? Now that I have the cart item, before delete, let's go ahead, add an update. Let's keep them together, right? All right. I'm going to update this cart item. First of all, what do we need to do? We need to make sure that this cart item is actually valid. So I'm going to check invalid. Yeah, I'm going to check whether this cart item is valid or not. So cart item dot get ID. So I'm using cart item ID, using which I'm trying to cart get ID. Yeah, find by ID. All right, and I'm passing this. Was the issue? My bad. Cart item repository. Yes, not cart item repository. Cart repository. I'll get a cart item. Cart item. Let's call it item. Okay, so I'm trying to fetch the cart item using the ID sent in the request. If I didn't find it, I'll throw invalid ID exception, right? If we get it, that means at least the cart item is the valid one. Now we need to verify that the cart item that we have fetched has the same user ID and the item ID, which is sent by the client, right? So if we need to verify, so cart item dot get user ID. User ID is, yeah, dot equals user ID is UUID. So we can call this function. So this, if this item has the same user ID as the ID sent in by the client, if they are not the same, right? I'm trying to update a cart item and then I'm providing the wrong user ID. That shouldn't be the case. Or the item ID that I'm trying to update is not the same that is saved using this cart item ID, right? I have a cart item ID, right, in which I have an item ID that this cart item ID, cart item ID is for this item and for this user. So that item ID is this ID, inside of which we have item ID and user ID. Both should be valid. So that's why we are validating both the user ID and the item ID, right? Sent by the user. If any of this is invalid, right? Any of the ID, either your user ID or the item ID sent by the user to update the cart item is invalid, right? Will throw invalid ID exception. What we are going to do, return new, my bad, throw new invalid ID exception, cart, or my bad, invalid user or item ID, right? Yeah, if that is not the case, that means it's fine. If we need to verify one thing, this cart item, we are already validating that the quantity should be positive, so no issue with that. Price we are not going to update, right? Only thing we are going to update is the quantity. Price and name will remain the same. So again, go back, and the price, my bad, the item count, that is the quantity, will already be positive. The only thing is that it shouldn't be the same. If it is the same, we are not updating anything. So if item dot get quantity is same as cart item dot get quantity, if it is the same, throw new invalid operation exception, cannot update. Uh, cannot update item quantity at, okay, item quantity is already all right. Can't update as item ID. So error, it's up to you, whatever you want to uh, return back, but it should be something that that lets the client know that what went wrong. So with this message, they'll be they'll know that the quantity is already what they are trying to set again, right? If that is not the case, let's update item dot set quantity, cart item dot set quantity, then you can save, all right, and then it will be updated. Once you're trying to save it, the ID is same, so it will be updating the item only, all right, and then you will get the updated cart item, then you can return back to the user, right? So it is the same as this one, not this one, this one, all right, it is the same. So cart item dot update cart item, and I'll provide the cart item. Yeah, it throws some exception. That exception we have added. Now if I try to run it, and I think we already have cart item, right? If I update it, yeah, nothing. So we have basically deleted it, right? So let's go back here. Okay, we have removed quantity. So update cart item is that fetch add cart item. So let's go ahead add with 5 quantity. So yeah, it's running. If I try to save it, yeah, with id 3 we have added a cart item and quantity is 5. Now I want to update cart item. So to update slash cart item slash update, again post mapping slash cart slash update post mapping, and the id was 3, right? Update cart item. So I'll set the id to 3. Earlier I had set the quantity to, yeah, 5. Let's try to save it as 5 again. Can't update as item quantity is already 5, right? Simple. Let's change it to 1. Yeah, updated quantity is 1 now. So if I fetch it from the database, I have the quantity 1, right? So the update mapping, update endpoint is working just fine, right? There's one thing I'm leaving this as an exercise to you, and that is this. When you're saving an item into the cart, make sure that the user is not trying to add the same item twice. When you are adding in cart, you don't add same item 2 times. You just increase the quantity to 2, right? You don't add twice, right? As of now we are not checking that in the service, right? When we are trying to save it, we are not making sure that this item id is existing in the cart or not. So I'm leaving this as an exercise for you to update this add cart service, add cart function in the service, to make sure that the user is not adding the same cart item 2 times in 2 different calls, right? So yeah, try to update that also. So yeah, we have successfully added the cart endpoints to our project. Now there is only one thing remains, and that is to add uh, order APIs to our project, and then it will be completed, right? So yeah, this is it for this lecture. Thank you guys for watching. Until the next video drops, keep coding. Thank you.